Extra Chapter: The Ruler of the Renoa University of Magic. Among the three magic nations, the Renoa Kingdom in particular was famous for its magical education, having produced a number of exceptional magicians. 100 years prior, as the leader of the alliance between the three nations, Renoa had established the magic city of Sharia. 3 prestigious organizations, one from each country, were based in this city. The Duchy of Neris's Magical Implements Workshop, the Duchy of Basharant's Magicians Guild, and finally, Renoa's University of Magic. The university was the most famous of the three. There were tales told about its attendees, who included the court magicians of the three nations, the faculty of magical academies in the Asura Kingdom, and some adventurers who had left their mark on the world. There were even songs about adventurers like Roxy Magurdia, an alumnus of the university. Currently, its student body numbered over 10,000, and this distinguished mammoth of a school offered a varied curriculum that went beyond just magic. A certain student had enrolled herself at this prestigious institution, one named Ariel Anemoi Asura. "Ah, Princess Ariel, good morning." "Good morning." It was a bright spring morning. Voices echoed along the tree-lined paths that extended from the student dorms to the main building. "Miss Saria, Miss Misha, good day to you." The woman who responded to the greetings was a charismatic beauty with silky blonde hair, glowing bright enough to turn every head as she walked. "Oh?" She suddenly turned with a smile and an outstretched hand. "Miss Saria, your collar needs straightening." "Huh? Oh, there, it's fixed. You're beautiful, so you must simply pay attention to your appearance." Oh, yes!" The younger girl's cheeks reddened. Ariel nodded in satisfaction. "Have a wonderful day, ladies," she said, and continued down the walkway. The girl left in her wake spent a few moments dumbfounded before she turned to her friend, bouncing with excitement. "Princess Ariel touched me! She said I was beautiful! Beautiful! That's so amazing! Seriously!" Ariel listened to the pleasant sound of their boisterous squeals as she continued on her way to the school. People erupted into murmurs as they spotted her. "Look, it's Princess Ariel. She always looks so beautiful. Maybe I should try talking to her. Idiot, like she'd ever give you the time of day." Men and women alike exclaimed their admiration when they saw her. Even though they all wore the same uniform, Ariel still shone like a light in the dark. "Look, it's Master Luke and Master Fitz. They're so dreamy. Look at the three of them together. It's almost like a painting come to life." It wasn't just Ariel who drew attention. The 2 protectors shadowing her were targets of envy as well. One was the handsome Luke Greyrat, with his vibrant brown hair slicked back. The other was the young boy Fitz, with his short-cropped white hair and thick sunglasses. Both of them, the dreamy knight and pretty boy, served the most beautiful woman in the school. The sight of them was enough to excite the other students' imaginations, fostering the idea that these 3 individuals existed on some higher dimension than the rest. "Hey, have you heard? Lady Ariel is looking for exceptional people." "What for?" "To be your trusted retainer when she returns to her kingdom. At least that's what I heard." "Seriously? Amazing. Can I volunteer myself?" "With your grades? As if." "Yeah, better keep working at it." These 3 envied individuals were the center of the school's attention. Bathed in the warm spring sunlight, they looked even more gorgeous than they had in winter. Everyone believed, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they had a dazzling future ahead of them. Why were they so beloved by the students? Was it because of their looks? Their impressive skills? Those were contributing factors, of course, but not the real reason. To understand how Ariel established herself in her current position, we will have to go back several years. Several years prior, Ariel Anemoi Asura had lost the political battle in the Asura Kingdom and fled the country. Some theorize she died in the process, but while it was true that she was pursued by assassins, she somehow managed to escape to the Renoa Kingdom. Ariel received protection from the kingdom and then, as she originally intended, successfully enrolled in the University of Magic. Of course, she hadn't given up on regaining power in the Asura Kingdom. Ariel knew she must return as soon as possible, for the sake of Pilamon Notos Greyrat, who still supported her from within the kingdom. But it was clear that history would just repeat itself if she returned as she was now, and so the princess concocted the idea of scouting for exceptional talent at Renoa's university in order to send them back to Asura ahead of her. To accomplish this objective, Ariel decided to strengthen her influence at the school. The student council at the university possessed neither complete autonomy nor strong authority, but it was seen as the pinnacle of a school attended by 10,000 students, and highly influential among those students. Ariel, who was looking to recruit talent before it even began to bloom, found the organization exceptionally useful. Intent on her objective, and already supremely talented, Ariel distinguished herself quickly, and her request to join the student council was approved despite the fact that she was a mere first year. After a few months had passed and Ariel was certain she had a solid foundation to work from, she gathered all of her attendants in her room for a strategy meeting. "We were able to enter the student council, but we mustn't grow complacent. This is merely the first step." "Understood." Nearly 20 of her attendants had been killed on the road by assassins, so their number had dwindled. Now she had just 4. Luke Notice Greyrat, Elamoy Bluewolf, Clane Eldrod, and Fitz. "All we have to do is utilize the student council's reputation to recruit good people," said Fitz. "That won't be enough," Ariel shook her head. "Before this is over, I'd like to have the support of both the leaders of this country and the Magicians Guild." Renoa Kingdom's leaders and the Magicians Guild were both hugely influential in Asura, whose own teachings and magic came from Renoa itself. Granted, we'll have to impress them if we want their aid in this political power struggle. Impress them, like, with money? No, with power. Ariel giggled as Fitz tilted his head. "I am trying to become the ruler of the Asura Kingdom. Just being a member of the student council won't convince them to support my cause. I must become someone who moves the council. In other words, I have to become the president," she continued. "The vice president graduates next year, and the president the year after that. Thus, I plan to aim first for the position of vice president, and then for that of president." "Yes, I think that's a good idea. Those of like mind and exceptional ability will surely flock to someone of your caliber." "And it is those very people that we seek," Luke said approvingly. The other 3 nodded. It had been 6 months since they'd first enrolled, and they still had yet to recruit any allies. The only things Ariel had at her disposal were her natural-born charisma, the fact that she'd been accepted into the student council as a first year, and the adoration of the other students. There were exceptional individuals who had caught her eye, but she had yet to reach a level where she could win their favor, unveil the full truth of her situation, and convince them to fight alongside her in the Asura Kingdom. The way she would prefer it, indeed, the way things should really be, was for them to approach her first. If the natural order of things is for you to become president, then you should ideally win the vote by an overwhelming majority, Elamoy said, her hand pressed to her chin. The sitting president was in charge of selecting and appointing appropriate candidates to the council. When a president retired, all remaining members became candidates for the position, and the president would be determined by a school-wide vote. Such was the rule established by the first principal of the school, a tradition that had continued ever since. Even so, Ariel was a mere first-year student. Next year, the current vice president would likely ascend to the presidency. Once they graduated and an election was conducted, the other current members, all in their 6th and 7th years by then, with numerous accomplishments of their own, would doubtless stand in her way. Even if she could defeat them, it would likely be by a narrow margin. Granted, becoming student council president as a third-year student would still be an impressive feat, but it wouldn't be exceptional unless she also dominated the vote in a landslide victory. Such was the path that Ariel envisioned. You might even call it an essential prerequisite for her future. If she couldn't accomplish even this much, then returning to the Asura Kingdom would remain nothing more than a dream within a dream. In fact, she might need to aim even higher. "It may be unnecessary for you to take the presidency next year," murmured Fitz. The white-haired boy had a grim look on his face, and his arms were folded over his chest. "Oh my, you say some terrifying things, Fitz. Are you proposing we outmaneuver the current vice president?" Although Ariel was a first-year student, there was no doubt that she had 4 exceptional subordinates, charisma that had earned her great adoration among the first years, and practical skills to boot. And so, she had cut a deal with the current vice president. She would endorse them for the position of president in the next election, and in return, they would appoint her to their former position. This meant giving up her chance at the presidency this year, but if she were diligent in planting seeds during her second year, then she could be fairly confident of reaping the results in her third. That plan is good, certainly, but shouldn't we attempt something even more impressive? Fitz was absolutely right. If you unravel the threads of the university's long history, you wouldn't find a single soul who had risen to the rank of president in their second year. The only exception was the first president of the student council, but that didn't count, since there were only first years in attendance at the time. Plus, if Ariel were to defeat the person who was a shoo-in for the presidency in a landslide, they would be talking about it in the city of Sharia. Word of her accomplishment might even reach the leaders of the 3 magic nations. One might think of the university as a simple school, but there were many alumni who went on to become leaders of the 3 magic nations and the Magicians Guild. If something extraordinary happened in the university for the first time since it was founded, there is a good chance it would come to their attention. True, we won't be able to defeat the vice president without a plan. Well, about that. I actually do have a really good plan. Let's hear it. Though caught off guard by Fitz's proposal, Ariel shifted in her seat and listened closely. Well, Princess, you know how you've been the target of some harassment lately? Indeed. It had started just after she joined the student council. There were several incidents in succession. People spitting in front of her as she walked, people bumping shoulders with her, people purposely hitting her with a water ball during magic practice. They were passed off as coincidences, but Ariel knew they were intentional. After all, they had gradually escalated in severity. The worst was when some of her underwear, which she had hung out to dry at night, was stolen and dumped in front of the boys' dormitory. That had indisputably been a step too far, and she'd asked Fitz and Elmoy to look into the matter. As a result of which, I discovered the masterminds, Fitz announced. Linnea and Persnia. So it was those 2, after all. They were the descendants of the leaders of the Doldia tribe, which reigned sovereign among the beast folk. The 2 girls traveled halfway across the world from the Great Forest. As members of the Doldia tribe, they'd had a pampered upbringing and let their magical talent go to their heads. The lenient environment at the school only worsened their attitudes, and the 2 became complete delinquents, feared by the entirety of the student body. With their entourage of 20-plus fierce-looking beast folk in tow, people cleared the way wherever they went. If you so much as made eye contact, their whole gang would pile on you. The school administrators were troubled by their inappropriate conduct, but the girls were essentially princesses of the Doldia tribe. Reprimanding them ran the risk of making enemies of all beastfolk at the university. And the beastfolk were quite numerous here, if still a minority compared to the humans. And so the school had yet to step in, and many a student cried themselves to sleep at night. What does that have to do with your plan? We crush them. Fitz closed his hand into a fist. These students are terrified of those bullies. If we put a stop to them, everyone will be on your side, Princess. A fire burned in Fitz's eyes. What they had done was unforgivable. Fitz respected and adored Ariel, and they had taken her underwear and dropped in front of the boys' dorm of all places, with the nerve to add a note saying, "This underwear belongs to the Asuran princess." Since then, many of the male beastfolk had watched Ariel with hungry looks. Presumably the princess was unfazed by this, but Fitz couldn't stand it. "If we start trouble with them in school, it will be our reputation that plummets," Ariel said. "If we can provoke them into attacking us first, it will be legitimate self-defense. The school would back us up in such a scenario. Plus, if that's what we're up against, I'm pretty sure I can handle it by myself." Ariel briefly considered his words, then glanced at the faces of those present. Whenever she felt unsure, she sought the opinions of her other attendants. "I think it's a good idea. What they did was unforgivable. If it comes down to a fight, I'll jump in. I can't offer much, but I will help where I can." Agreed. Their words were reassuring, and Ariel offered them an encouraging smile in return. "Well then, while I'm sure what we're about to attempt is risky, since you all agree, let's give it a go." And thus, the mission to crown Ariel as the student council president was underway. The plan was put into motion about a week later. It was noon, and all the students were moving to the school cafeteria. Linnea had her hands shoved in her pockets, and Persnia had something that resembled a cigarette protruding from her mouth. Their uniforms looked sloppy, their postures terrible. They looked the part of delinquents so well that if Rudius had seen them, he would have hugged the wall and kept his head down to avoid meeting their eyes. Such bullies existed even in this world. The Beast Girls strutted at the head of their pack as if they owned the place. In comparison, Ariel's group was only 3 people strong: Ariel, Luke, and Fitz. They made it look like they'd encountered Linnea and Persia in front of the cafeteria by chance. At first, Linnea and Ariel exchanged looks that demanded that the other person make way, but it was Ariel who finally feigned indifference and stepped aside. The beast folk let forth a snicker as they watched. How pathetic. Some princess. Oh yeah, wasn't that her underwear lying in front of the dorm recently? She's trying to hook men that way, right? Humans mate for their entire lives, after all. They cackled. Enough, Mew, said Linnea. Yeah, you're making me feel sorry for her, agreed Persia. The two looked smug as they delivered those reprimands and headed into the cafeteria. It felt good to ridicule the privileged. It felt even better to put a stop to it, thereby gaining the moral high ground. There was nothing Ariel could do about it either. After all, Linnea and Persia had 20 beast folk in tow. Most of them were half human, and they'd never been in a proper fight before. But there was strength in numbers, which they used to mock the wildly popular princess of a large country. Parading around with 20 men in tow like some kind of herd. Seems the Doldiar really know better than animals, Ariel muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Her lips had barely even moved, so none of the other students could hear her. Hey, what did you just say? However, beastfolk had far better hearing than the humans, and could pick up even the quietest of sounds. Thus, Linnea and Persia had caught that faint utterance. The rest of their band didn't have quite as advanced hearing, but several of them heard it too. I don't believe I said anything, Ariel replied innocently. No, I'm sure I heard it. Mew! You were trash-talking us. Mew! Weren't they, Persia? Seriously, fuck them. Linnea's fur was puffed up, and Persia had spit out whatever she'd had in her mouth. A chicken bone, as it turned out. Persia was so gluttonous that she constantly snacked between meals. Once they were certain that Ariel was picking a fight, they marched right up to her and stared her down. Well, go on, try saying that to us again, Mew! This time, do it to our faces. Or you can prostrate yourself, offered Persia. Get on your back and show us your belly. I already told you I didn't say anything. Ariel spoke with confidence, even as the two threatened her. To an outside observer, it looked like Linnea and Persia were antagonizing Ariel without cause. Linnea narrowed her eyes. Don't tell me you're a chicken, Mew! Chicken? I eat chicken, growled Persia. What on earth is this about? Ariel, on the other hand, seemed entirely unaffected. She looked every bit as bold as a king. And then, barely audible, she said, Once this year's mating season is over, you'll be having children of men whose names you don't even know, just like mutts on the street. No one could see Ariel's lips move. As Asuran nobility, she had been trained to speak without detection. Therefore, her whisper was only loud enough for Linnea and Persia, who were in close range, to pick up. You bitch! You have some nerve! Fine, we'll fight you, Mew! We'll beat the crap out of you, strip you naked, and dump water all over you! From the sidelines, it looked like Linnea and Persia had suddenly lost their tempers because they didn't like Ariel's attitude. In fact, no one doubted that was what it was. The Beast Girls often had exactly this reaction when they thought someone was being too cocky with them. And as soon as they jumped into action, their 20 lackeys followed. You'll be seeing stars soon! Say your prayers! We'll pound you into the ground! The swarm of them flew forward, arms reaching for Ariel. They wouldn't reach her. Grah! Gah! Before they even realized what was happening, they'd been sent flying back through the air. In a split second, they were scattered and tumbling across the floor. Linnea and Persia instantly leaped back to their feet, scanning their surroundings. What was that? Meow! It's Fitz! That little minion of Ariel's did something. Fitz, the white-haired boy that always stood behind Ariel with a look of indifference, was in front of the princess. As soon as the beastfolk moved, he stepped in front of her and used his silent casting to create a shockwave that blasted them back. The only one who'd moved forward was Fitz. Ariel maintained her prim and proper posture, and although Luke's hand rested on the hilt of his blade, he didn't move. Fitz stood completely alone, and yet he looked confident that he could handle them. Fitz said nothing. He rarely ever spoke. Only a few students had ever heard his voice. Now that he stood in their way, Linnea and Persia made him their target. Yah! The 20 beastfolk fell on Fitz like a wave. Fitz remained silent. His body didn't even move, just his hands. Each time they did, a fiery explosion happened, or an icy object shot from the ground. These attacks relentlessly pummeled the beastfolk, and in seconds, all 20 of them were sent tumbling through the air. They squealed like puppies as they were blasted with Fitz's magic, either knocked unconscious or scrambling to retreat. 20 opponents were a lot, but they were all unaccustomed to fighting, scarcely attended class, and primarily relied on violence in numbers to maintain their threatening appearance. I'm gonna tear you to pieces, meow! Fuck yeah, we will! Only Linnea and Persia were different. Their fighting spirits weren't dampened, not even as they witnessed Fitz's magic for themselves. In fact, they dodged each spell with great agility. Linnea then charged forward, while Persia put her hands to her lips. Ooh! They had unique vocal cords that could make sounds infused with magic to instantly paralyze their opponent. This type of magic was inherent to the beastfolk. A tendril of blood trickled from Fitz's nose, and his upper body slumped forward. Once Linnea was sure he'd been hit, she slashed her claws towards his face. Hyah! One of them would use vocal magic to seal the enemy's movement, while the other went in for the kill. That was Linnea and Persia's strategy for victory. However, in the next moment, Fitz made a baffling move. He lifted his hands and slapped his ears. Blood burst forth. At the same time, Linnea charged in. I gotcha, meow! Her claws slashed forward, but just as she was certain she'd hit her target, Fitz sank downwards. Linnea caught a few strands of his hair, but now he had slipped right in past her defenses. His fist shot into the pit of her stomach, emitting a shockwave that sent her flying through the air like shrapnel from an explosion. Why? Gasped Persia. Fitz didn't miss a beat. He headed right for Persia, who was visibly shaken by the fact that her vocal magic hadn't hit its mark. She frantically tried to brace herself, but it was already too late. Ha! He sent her airborne with an invisible wave from his outstretched fist. She slammed against the wall of the cafeteria and lost consciousness. Fitz came and stood in front of Linnea, who was gasping for air. The boy had carried out his wrath in silence this entire time. Linnea was in shock as he towered over her. She glanced at her surroundings, but not a single person from their group remained standing. Even her reliable partner was sprawled helplessly on the ground with her legs spread wide open, completely unconscious. Linnea realized that their group had been decimated and lost the will to fight. You win, meow! Even as Linnea conceded defeat, Fitz remained eerily quiet. His eyes were hidden behind sunglasses, but the anger was still there, a true killing intent that couldn't be satisfied by this joke of a fight. Fitz knew exactly what they had done, that they'd thrown water on Ariel, stolen her underwear, and discarded it. Linnea might have her pride, but she didn't value it more than her life. We're sorry, meow. We'll apologize for the underwear incident, too. I'll even do this, meow. Linnea had no choice but to take a submissive posture, exposing her stomach in repentance. It was the most humiliating move for beastfolk. Fitz smashed a ball of water over both Linnea, who was prostrating herself, and Persia, who was lying unconscious a short distance away. There was little attack power behind it, but it was the equivalent of having a bucket upended on them. Both beast girls were drenched, looking quite pitiful with their fur flattened against their skins. If you've truly learned your lesson, never raise your hand against Princess Ariel again. Fitz left them with those words. He rarely ever said anything. It was the first time Linnea, Persia, and the rest of the students in the cafeteria, indeed, any of them, save for Ariel and Luke, had heard him speak. His voice was high, almost feminine. Yes, understood. Linnea nodded, her face bright red with shame. Fitz, well done. Let's be on our way. Ariel offered him a quick smile when he returned, and their group departed as if nothing had ever happened. Only Linnea and Persnia were left in their wake, looking like a couple of drowned rats. They soon retreated, unable to withstand the attention that was now focused on them. All the students who had witnessed this spontaneously broke into applause. That was the moment when the delinquents who acted like they ruled the school were defeated. After that, courtesy of Elmoy and Clayne's work, rumors spread that it was, in fact, Linnea and Persnia who had sent their minions to beat up Ariel. The majority of the beastfolk involved were expelled in the incident's aftermath. And that was how Ariel secured her current position. By driving the delinquents out of the school and bringing peace back to the campus, she earned the gratitude of the students, who then voted for her in the following election. She became the student council president in her second year, and many regard her with strong admiration. This situation, of course, didn't sit well with the vice president. They spent their remaining year making snide comments, but they had the courage to face Fitz, the very man who had taken on the indomitable Linnea and Persnia all by himself, and graduated quietly. As for the humiliated party of two, fuck! Somehow, they'd managed to avoid expulsion. Their behavior wasn't entirely improved, and they were still hostile towards Ariel, but they were attending classes more seriously. They would hiss and bark like sore losers whenever they laid eyes on her, even as they tucked their tails between their legs and made way for her to pass. We won't forget what you did to us, meow! Pfft, better not go out at night! Ariel said nothing. She just giggled. This only increased the admiration directed at Ariel and her two bodyguards. There was no one left at school who could stand up to the princess. That same princess was now a third-year student. Just as she'd planned, becoming the student council president in her second year allowed her to make contact with both the Magicians Guild and the rulers of the Renoa Kingdom. Those of like mind flocked to the student council, and Ariel picked the most exceptional and trustworthy to go to the Asura Kingdom and proceed with her plans. What she considered her vanguard would be leaving for the kingdom in the following year. Everything had gone surprisingly well in this past year since she became the president. Today they were conducting another one of their strategy meetings, though they had transitioned from her personal suite to the student council room. Now then, Clean, are there any promising candidates among the first years this year? She asked. There are. Zenoba Chirone and Cliff Grimmar in particular. The former is a blessed child, while the latter was able to perform advanced tier magic even before he enrolled. Very well. Let's look for opportunities to gradually engage them. Are there any others who stand out? Among the first years? No, I don't believe so. Clean shook her head. However, there may be some who will show promise in the future. I still require many more pieces for my chessboard. Perhaps we should look at reaching to those outside the school. As Ariel agonized over what to do, Elmoy looked up. Princess, I suspected you would say as much. I'd already located some particularly impressive individuals beyond the walls of the university. I expected no less. Let me see what information you have on them. Yes, Princess. Elmoy pulled out a sheaf of papers from one of the cabinets in the student council room and handed them over. I would propose selecting some of these, inviting them to the school, and then assessing their character before approaching them to join us. What do you think? That sounds good. Please, go ahead and begin the selection process. As for inviting them, we can ask Vice Principal Genius for aid with that, I'm sure. Yes, Princess. Fitz and Luke began to scan the list at Ariel's bidding. There were several different individuals on the list, from those already living in the magic city of Sharia, to active adventurers across the three nations, and even the protector of the Sword Sanctum, the sword god Galfarian himself. It was as Fitz studied the list that he suddenly gasped. His hand stopped when he spotted a name he recognized. His eyes went wide and his lips pursed shut. His trembling hand tightened against the paper, creasing it. Fitz, did someone catch your eye? The boy gave a sharp nod. His expression was a mix of surprise, bewilderment, and delight. Princess Ariel, I know this person. The paper in his hand had the name Rudius Greyrat written on it.